Good morning. Welcome back to another of our series of the Leaders Roundtable. And why we've been doing this roundtable is so the country can find out what's in this bill. CBS had a poll that only 10% of America knew what was in the bill. I think that number is even lower in Congress because they change every single day by every hour. As we do this roundtable, it may be changing, who knows. But the one thing we do know is what Nancy Pelosi said the last time they tried to take over government is that you've got to pass the bill to learn what's in it. And we've talked a number of different things. Yesterday we talked about the high price of gasoline, and the worst thing about that was all caused by their policies, and it doesn't have to be that way, that America can be energy independent. Today I want to talk about one of the most egregious things that the Democrats have been trying to do here, the expansion of big government, but what they're trying to do is hire 87,000 new IRS agents. And a lot of people sit back and say, oh, well, maybe that's good, you know, they could go after people who don't pay taxes, but what is the direction of these 87,000? You got to put in perspective, what's 87,000 new IRS agents? That's larger than the population of Scranton, Pennsylvania, the hometown of the president. Well, what their direction is, and it's changed as we go, first it was anybody that had $600. So that'd be pretty much all of America. They want to spy on you. They're going to force the financial institutions, be it the fintech, be it your credit union, other, to tell what you're doing with this money. Why should government ever be looking? And because of the backlash they got from the American public, say, oh, we're going to change it to 10,000. Well, what is 10,000 in a year? Anyone who makes or spends $28 a day. So if you buy a cup of coffee, you fill up your gasoline tank, well, just filling up your gas will easily break it. But buy a lunch and buy a dinner, you're there. So again, it's almost every single American out there. Why should government be spying on us? Why does government not trust their American citizens to start out with? And why would we spend money on this when we could hire a lot more border agents to protect our border. We could do a lot of other things. We could make our cities safer because they've been defunding the police. But this is the concept of what they want to go after. And why? Because they want to punish Americans to grab more money to spend more on social welfare inside America. And I think that's really what the discussion should be about today. What I have around the room are the leaders here within Congress. And what I want to just have a little discussion with that. We've got a couple people in the financial industry and in business on Zoom as well we want to talk about. But Drew, you serve on Ways and Means and as Deputy Whip. You've looked at some of this proposals and debated some of it already. What are you seeing out there and hearing from people? You might want to pull your mic a little your way.
Later, what we have seen coming from the Ways and Means Committee is particularly as it relates to the IRS surveillance of our fellow Americans, is that the Democrats are going all in on this. You're right. This is about them finding enough money. You get the sense that the Democrats are willing to come into your house and search into your sofa cushions to find every dime that they can to pay our fellow Americans not to work and just for their radical social big government spending program. But this is, if you look at this to me, this is about control. It's about them looking into your bank accounts, looking at what you're doing, what you're spending money on. What happens if the power and the party in power doesn't like the fact that you gave to a particular organization, or that you used your dollars to purchase something such as a firearm that goes against their ideology? This kind of surveillance is wrong, and it's one of the reasons that we introduced a bill, and a lot of members have been very upfront, fighting very hard on this to block the Treasury Secretary from implementing this policy.
Oh, I know. And Andrew, you're a freshman, but you come from Georgia, and you've been in business, and you were in a business after you served in the military on firearms, so you know about government regulations and how far they can go, but this is going after every single American. You accepted that when you opened your business. You know that there's regulation.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Leader. I'm a retired Navy officer and also a small business owner. I own a firearms business, and I have personally experienced, and I'd like just to take a minute to share my story with you, if that's all right. I have a very, very personal experience with the Internal Revenue Service where I suffered incredible abuse from them as a small business owner.
That was your first time. You weren't elected to Congress, but you came and testified here.
That's exactly right. My first real experience with Congress. On April 12th, 2013, the Internal Revenue Service, which was weaponized by the Obama administration at the time. So just think about what 87,000 additional agents would do, all right? But they came in and wrongfully confiscated $940,000 from my firearms business. They accused me of depositing my legally earned money, which was fully reported, in the bank in the wrong denomination. They were looking at every transaction that I deposited under $10,000. That's what they were looking for. You know, they called it structuring my deposits. Back then, I didn't even know what structuring was. I thought structure was a good thing in business, but come to find out, it's not when you're dealing with the IRS. But they had been doing this to small businesses all across the country, snooping in their bank accounts for any transaction. Mine were all below $10,000 because, like most small businesses, the standard cash policy was to ensure nothing above $10,000. So every small business is at risk. Many people didn't have the financial resources to stand up for themselves and ultimately lost my business. But in my case, the IRS offered me a deal. We'll give you back 1/3 of the $940,000 if you'll forfeit, or excuse me, 2/3 of the $900,000 if I'll forfeit 1/3 to them. They wanted $325,000.
For what? Just because you deposit your money in the bank?
That's correct. Because they said I deposited it in the wrong way. They wanted $325,000 from me. And I said, no, I haven't done anything wrong. This is extortion. And so I fought them. I beat them in court, but it cost me $150,000 that I never got back. And so I decided that I wasn't going to let this happen to any other American citizen. And then I came to Washington, testified before the Oversight Subcommittee of House Ways and Means. Congress created a bill that took away the authority of the IRS to ever confiscate legally earned money again through that procedure. And now the IRS is trying to do it again. They're
But now they're doing it on a
absolutely
bigger
trying to do it
scale.
again. And you know, I've got a great quote here that Nancy Pelosi said back in 2013. She said, the IRS, those are 3 scary initials to most people, not because they think they've done anything wrong, but they're just worried that they'll be treated fairly. And that's it.
Yeah.
Everybody is worried that the IRS will treat them fairly or will not treat them fairly.
Think how many people didn't have the resources that the IRS can just intimidate to give. That was in your business. Now they want to do it to almost all Americans.
That's right.
If they have $10,000, not $10,000, but over a year, $10,000 to their account. That's just $28 a day. Mm-hmm. And what are they going to do to fight back? They'll just come in and confiscate.
They won't have the ability to fight back. They'll just have to roll over because they don't have the...
And you got 87,000 more people looking at it with no warrants or anywhere else. And then they're forcing our financial institutions to do the work for them, to send them the information.
They become, the financial institutions become the IRS police.
Yeah. Actually, you've come from Iowa, and you've covered stories. You worked in the legislature, and now in Congress, one of the leaders on appropriations. What are you hearing back home about this as well?
Well, first of all, thanks for including all of us in this conversation, because ultimately, you know what my colleague just said, Andrew, you talked about it, it's extortion. This is about unprecedented access for the IRS to get into people's bank accounts at that granular level. It's about unprecedented power. Yep. And Iowans are onto this, and our office has fielded about 2,000 phone calls just in the past couple weeks about this issue specifically, because ultimately the IRS does not need to be snooping in Americans' bank accounts. And you talk about that $28 a day threshold. You think about a family running to the grocery store. You think about, I think about how much I just spent to fill up my minivan. Last week it was over $60, right? So you're hitting that threshold everywhere you're going. This is not about making sure people are complying with taxes, and Iowans realize that, and that's what we're hearing. This is not about going after people who are making billions of dollars a year. This is about going after everyday hardworking Americans, everyday hardworking small business owners, and the fear is palpable, and that's what this is about. It's about fear, it's about control, it's about that power. So I think ultimately when you look at who this is going to affect, people are aware that this is about big government, and they're speaking out about it. And they want us to speak up about it here to really, you talk about people knowing what's in this bill, these misguided proposals. Americans need to very quickly wake up to what's happening here in Washington, because even if it doesn't make it into this package, we're hearing Democrats now for the first time come out and say, hey, maybe, a couple of them, maybe, we shouldn't do this. But this is the intent of the IRS. This is the intent of this administration. And so that's why it's really great that we're able to talk about it.
You raised some very good points, and the scary part here is, as we speak and have this discussion, the Democrats are down having a meeting, and they brought the president in, and they want him to vote on a bill without knowing what's in it.
Right.
To think that you could pass something like that, so the American public wouldn't even know what's happening, and you raise a good point. It's going after almost every single American. Not that they've done anything wrong, but greater power, greater control.
Right.
Now, Tom, you spent your life fighting for the underdog all the way through. And you stood on financial services, so you really see what government's trying to do here.
Oh, this is so dirty, Kevin. And I really appreciate you doing this, because the American public needs to understand this is the intent, as Ashley was just saying. This is the intent of this administration. This is the intent of Democrats. And I take issue. I don't think it's snooping. This is literally spying on American citizens. Our government is actually moving to spy on citizens. It's so dirty because we aren't even talking about the fact that this proposal to spy on bank accounts of individual Americans all across the country has been out there since last May. They slipped it into the Treasury Green Book last May, never talked about it. They just wanted this thing, in your words, Mr. Leader, they didn't want to have to read the bill before they passed it, and then, boy, lo and behold, the IRS would be showing up at the next Andrew Clyde business and saying, you know what, we don't like what you're doing with these transactions. And whether it's $600 or $10,000, that's just a game, that's a shell game. They're playing games with numbers, right? The bottom line is this is going to attack every law-abiding American where it counts. It also, I got to tell you, we found out about it in August because there was a grassroots movement out there, which is good because it came before the bill was ever passed. In my district, for instance, in my home, I've got letters from the credit union down in Red Wing, Minnesota. I've got others that have weighed in. I love this quote from this Red Wing credit union. Personal and business finances are very private matters to our members, and our credit union has worked hard to be their trusted partner and advisor. Quote, we have heard from other members that if this proposal becomes law, which we will be compelled to follow, they will close their financial accounts.
Right, absolutely.
You will have people there already leaving. Keep in mind that more than 3 in 5 adults already do not trust the IRS. And when you hear stories like Andrew's, why would they and why should they? By the way, that's including more than 50% of Democrats don't trust the IRS. Mm-hmm. More than half of adults don't trust the IRS to keep their financial data safe. I mean, these guys can't keep up with the SARS reports that they get right now. I've got one from a different financial institution in Minnesota that told me they have sent over 700 of these SARS reports in the last 5 years. They've never heard back on one of them. So now why would Not one time. Not one time. Why would they ever want all this new data that they can't even handle the data they're getting? And keep in mind the last one, Kevin, you know this better than anybody. The IRS gets about 1.4 billion cyber attacks a year.
Yep.
I mean, they've already been compromised. This is a terrible attack on individual liberty, on privacy. Whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or you call yourself something else, people disagree that our government should be spying on them.
Well, I just don't understand it. I mean, you think of America, you think of the freedom. We would think this is in China, that they're going to spy on all their citizens. I mean, if you want to buy an airline ticket in China, you could have the money, but they first look at your score, what you've been saying. Now I'm hiring 87,000 agents, making government bigger, just to go after average Americans. It is very scary. And Mike, you've won that anytime I'm in a fight, I want you with me because be it the football field, be it in business, but I remember when you first came in, you gave this one speech on the floor that you went to a community park, that you wanted this park open. And here was government coming in and going to keep them from playing at this park.
because the mirror in the bathroom wasn't the right size. So the community couldn't enjoy it. And you know what? You just spoke up. And people said, yes, why all that? And now you sit on Ways and Means, where you can be a voice for so many. You see what this really is. Why don't you talk a little bit about it? Make sure you move the mic over. I know you've got a strong voice.
Yeah, and thank you, Leader, for having this today, because now Andrew's already talked a little bit about it, but it was Senator Hatch that said the most feared of all government agencies is the IRS. I would propose, if we're going to make some changes, I think they should start wearing brown shirts when they come into people's businesses and into people's lives. I mean this sincerely. This country, this nation, where 1.5 million men and women have given their lives for our form of government, we are proposing we are trying to keep it from happening. The proposal to be the most intrusive government we've ever faced in our lives. To dot every I, cross every T, and knowing that famous saying was, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you, is one of the ones we need to take a look at right now. The effort that you're putting forth today. When you look at the IRS's mission statement, you would swear to God that they've never read it. The whole purpose of the IRS is to help us navigate a very difficult tax system, to be there as an aid, not as an enemy.
Yes.
To be there as somebody you can go to for help, not somebody you run away from. These newest measures are reflective of a party that can't control its spending, so it tries to find every single, not just dollar, quarter, nickel, penny, anything that's out there, and try to shake down hardworking American taxpayers. When I see what's going on in the country today, I would ask our fellow citizens, wake up. Wake up. We are turning our backs on 1.4 million people that gave our lives to be able to practice this. What's happening right now is the polar opposite of the founding of America, where a bigger government has bigger control, is more intrusive, and believes, and the other party is like this. I would just tell our folks that listen to this, they don't believe that you have the intelligence or the ability to actually live your own life.
That's a very good point.
They have to have oversight in everything, or you just won't be able to survive. And you know what? For us in America, that's why the men and women, the people in this boat behind you, which I think is the greatest picture ever, of Washington crossing Delaware, they were together on one thing. They wanted to get away from big government. They wanted to get away from big taxes. They wanted to get away from people who are so intrusive, the way they worship, the way they run their business, the way they raise their families. Every single aspect of our lives is being taken over by a group of people who think that on our own, we just don't have the intelligence to live a good life. So listen, what you're doing, and you know that this is tough. This is tough because we will get attacked from the left on everything we do. I would just tell them, you know what? Be like that kid who stood in front of that tank.
Gentleman Square.
And say, I don't give a damn the size of your tank. I'm more interested in the courage in my heart and the ability we have to live our lives freely. This intrusion by the IRS is absolutely incredible. They're there to help us navigate. Hell, they're sitting on 10.7 million tax returns from 2019 and 2020, and they're worried about us not paying our fair share? Wake up. Wake up.
And you know what? You did so well in the last, when we were able to get a tax bill through that simplified it, where IRS could be smaller, where it's, what, less than 10% of people itemize today? So why would you need more agents? It's not thinking to cheat, but now they want to not just empower government. This is the thing that really scares me is they're empowering government and they're using business as part of government too. And this is what we've got some friends here. I want to introduce Eric Bruin. He is the mayor of the city of Ridgecrest. It's in my district. But he is president and CEO of Desert Valley Federal Credit Union. I met Eric when he first came to town. But I want to tell you, when you think about a credit union, he expanded his credit union. And when he built this credit union, you know what he did? He spent more money and he built another room. And it wasn't for the credit union, it was for the community to use as a community center. There's many times I go there for town halls, but anybody can use it. That's what the credit union was about. And now government is going to direct him to say that they have to report banks, credit unions, fintechs, other financials
any information transaction, just like what happened to you. To his members who are coming because they're joining together, and this is what, yeah, they trust this place. They know Eric behind the place. They made him mayor of the city. They go to his community center to have meetings about what's going on in the community. But now they're going to turn around and say, government has empowered you to spy on me. That's wrong. That's right. Eric, you're with us today. You want to talk a little bit about this?
Thank you, Kevin. And I'm Leader McCarthy, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. And members of the GOP conference, it's a great honor to be here on behalf of the Credit Union National Association and the California Credit Union League. As Kevin said, and I apologize, I keep saying Kevin versus Leader McCarthy because I've known this man for close to 17 years. As the CEO of a small credit union, we appreciate that you guys are fighting to ensure that all financial service providers have an opportunity to give our perspectives on this initiative. And it really, truly is a dangerous initiative. So a little bit of background. Again, Desert Valleys is a $60 million credit union. We serve about 3,000 members in the rural community of Ridgecrest, California, which is the gateway to Death Valley. I also have the honor of serving as mayor, as Leader McCarthy said. Nationally, there's over 127 million credit union account holders, or as we call them, members, which many of you are. And really, this is a damaging and unprecedented public policy. The policy is flawed in so many ways. We appreciate and your efforts, and we hope Congress is successful in blocking its inclusion. I want to obviously thank the 2 letters sent by nearly the entire GOP conference opposing this policy, and thank you, Congressman Emmer, for your efforts. Congressman Emmer, you mentioned in your comments about the suspicious activity reports, or SARs. In 24 years of working in credit union industries, I've never heard a response to a SAR. So trust me, it's not something new. We continue this reporting into a black hole of information. But at the top of my concerns is really, how the public's lack of understanding of what is and is not going on here. We haven't seen revised legislative language yet, and we're operating under the assumption that this is supposed to exempt wage earners. But wages haven't been defined. I mean, leaving tips or cash-based economy workers could be vulnerable to audits. You have unreported income over $10,000 that's supposed to trigger this new reporting. And then finally, it's on us as financial institutions to deliver this information on a form which was designed to report $10 or more of interest in a calendar year, not to track cash flow of gross deposits to gross withdrawals. And when that triggering hits, obviously, how do we define, when the reporting triggers an audit for an individual who has a taxable event? I mean, think about it. I sell a car on the peer-to-peer market, or I have a life event like a wedding or a birth of a child. Would the fact that my parents gave me money for my wedding trigger an audit on a working class family that I have to prove that I got married? And look at it, what it's going to do in the long run. I mean, individuals are already beginning to withdraw savings from our credit union. We don't want to go back to the cash under the mattress approach. We obviously would see potential liquidity issues in our ability to fund and lend to the communities. We've been doing everything in our power legislatively and advocacy-wise to ensure that the underbanked are brought into the safety and security which is provided by an insured depository institution. But no matter which way you look at this, we don't need government defining what is and what is not the appropriate level of savings for working and middle-class families. If I have worked hard and I have sold assets and I have worked to create a savings for myself, it should not fall as a burden for me to tell the government how that person is acting. The proposal also has nothing to say about the compliance burden or the separation. How are we supposed to separate? This is in gross taxes and dollars, but like I said, a life event. How do I know what one person's life event was? There is so many challenges in this. I really thank the conference for the opportunity to speak and answer any questions. And thank you, Leader McCarthy, and all of you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. And I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Eric. And I'm going to introduce the next one. I'm going to have to, next guest, and I apologize, I'm going to step out, and Tom's going to take over. And after we hear from Warren, we have some press in the room, too, to ask us all questions, so everyone knows. After a distinguished U.S. naval career more than 20 years of accounting and business consulting experience. Warren Huddick, the president of Huddick and Company, is with us today. He has to do a lot of these tax reporting and consulting and accounting. Let's hear from him exactly what he sees about going forward with 87,000 new IRS agents and his dealing with the IRS. Warren?
Leader McCarthy and members of Congress, small businesses in Pennsylvania and throughout the country are struggling with labor shortages, rising inflation, supply chain disruptions. Given these challenges, the Biden administration's proposal to require annual reporting to the Internal Revenue Service of gross inflows and outflows from all small business and personal customer accounts would add insult to injury. This would sacrifice the privacy of law-abiding business owners and expose them to costly and burdensome audits. If this provision is added to the pay-for spending provisions of the Build Back Better Act, it would only serve to increase the heavy burden of taxes and mandates small business owners are facing in that legislation. This proposal would sacrifice the privacy of law-abiding small business owners, continuing a troubling trend of Congress increasingly intrusive government reporting requirements. Just last December, as part of the National Defense Bill, Congress passed a requirement for nearly every business with 20 or fewer employees to provide personal identifiable information to another database at the Department of Treasury, providing gross inflows and outflows about ordinary banking practices of small business owners should be alarming to Congress, particularly in light of the IRS's troubled history in violating taxpayer rights, due process requirements when investigating taxpayers under existing currency transaction reporting requirements. Moreover, NFIB is concerned that the IRS is incapable of safeguarding the account information of small business owners. The IRS has recently suffered from notable leaks and disclosures of taxpayer data. As former National Taxpayer Advocate Nina Olson has testified, the IRS, in quotes, still has 60 separate major databases containing taxpayer information. As a matter of fact, one of our clients, their personal information was compromised twice, 2 years in a row from the IRS. This broken system already has consequences, not only for taxpayer assistance, but also for audit selection, collection prioritization, and protection of taxpayer rights. There's no shortage of data already, and reporting to the IRS already. And Congress should not add this level of additional reporting. NFIB is also concerned with new reporting regime that result in IRS targeting small business owners with costly, burdensome audits. Approximately 83% of all small employers are organized as pass-through entities, S corporations, LLCs, sole proprietors, and partnerships. The increased reporting requirements would target these taxpayers for additional scrutiny and audits. As the administration has cited, sole proprietorships, partnerships, S corporation business income as the reason for this proposal. The proposal combined with IRS enforcement funding and provisions the administration is seeking focus so heavily on increased enforcement, increased revenue, and increased audits without any programmatic or cultural changes at the IRS that it would likely result in sacrificing taxpayer rights. As Ms. Olson further testified, because there is so much pressure on the IRS to collect revenue, there is a risk the IRS will not deploy the data intelligently or effectively and instead use enhanced information reporting to go after the lowest hanging fruit, in quotes. Now, it is not time to subject small business owners on new reporting requirements that will violate their privacy, subject them to additional audits and unwarranted scrutiny. And I want to put this in perspective. I have in my hand here the 1913 tax laws, regulations, amendments, rulings, decisions, forms, and instructions. There it is, bound version, 1913. As a matter of fact, the back page, this is the instructions right here. Here I have in my hand one customer's personal tax return and their business tax return. These are just the forms. What it doesn't include is the laws, regulations, amendments, rulings, decisions, and opinions, which, if printed, could not fit in this building. Just to put this in perspective, look, the IRS is made up of hardworking, patriotic Americans. But Congress has asked the impossible, and American taxpayers' expectations are unrealistic. This is unfair to the Internal Revenue Service, and this is unfair to American taxpayers. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to comment today.
Thank you. Before we open it up, I want to thank our leader, Kevin McCarthy, for initiating this conversation for myself and my colleagues, and more importantly, for all the Americans out there. On behalf of the leader, I want to thank Mayor Bruin for participating today, and Mr. Hudek, thank you very much. At this point, we open it up to any of the press that are in the room for questions.
Sean Ryan, Breitbart News. Thanks for doing this, everyone. I think Congressman Hinson mentioned this, but 20 House Democrats put out a letter yesterday to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer talking about the data privacy concerns for all of this data that the IRS will require through this proposal, as well as Joe Manchin has put out a lot of concern about this as well. So I was just kind of curious about your thoughts on why Democrats want to go so far with this provision just to find another offset for their infrastructure bill.
Well, I think first and foremost, it comes down to, I mentioned the word intent. This is what they want long-term. So maybe they're flagging a few of these concerns right now, but long-term, it's very clear that this is the direction that they want to go. And I think, Eric, you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, you mentioned, that folks are going to come to you and trying to take their cash out, and that's exactly what we don't want to see happen, is this run on cash and capital. All that will do is reduce access to capital, but what it will do is increase reliance on government, which is ultimately, I think, the clear future intent of what is to come of this rule. So they may be flagging some of these concerns now, after, I might add, that we've been putting public pressure on and talking about this for months as a team here at this table. So I think, again, this is about future intent, and they may be trying to save face, and I hope we can keep it from moving forward right now, but I hope we can keep it from moving forward at all.
Sean, and I'd add, I think they're probably looking at what their constituents feel right now. The leader talked about this is not communist China. If you look at the polling that's out there, which no doubt they're looking at, because I agree with Representative Hinson, this is their long-term goal. That's why they snuck it into the Treasury Green Book last May. That's why they never talked about it, because this is their goal, is to further weaponize the IRS against the American people and spy on bank accounts down to the smallest fraction of whatever an account has. But they clearly are seeing that 60% of voters in swing districts are less likely to vote for any elected official who supports this proposal. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why you saw 21 Democrats go to the speaker yesterday and say this has to come out, and clearly Joe Manchin was aware of it beforehand.
So the IRS provision in the in the reconciliation bill is, according to most reports I've seen, is actually the biggest potential funder to pay for all these other programs. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on where exactly the Democrats think they're going to be extracting revenue from. I know they say it's targeting rich people, it's for the millionaires and billionaires who don't pay taxes. Seems hard to believe that billionaires are just depositing money in their checking account and somehow skirting income tax or capital gains tax on that. So my first question is, who do you think will be actually hit by this? Do you think it will be the millionaires and billionaires who don't pay taxes? And my second question is, I wonder if you could speak a little bit to the fact that, and I understand the Republican Party is opposed to tax hikes in any regard, but the Democrats have such a hard time raising rates on top earners, and yet they seem to have no problems sneaking in this provision to bolster the IRS, which really, as you have said, you believe will just go after not millionaires and billionaires. So where do you speak about that dynamic a little bit?
Let's go to our Ways and Means guys. Drew?
Mike, you want to take that? And I'm happy. I've got many thoughts on it.
And we all have many thoughts on it. The truly wealthy don't get a paycheck. So when we start talking about who we're going after, the answer is everybody.
That's right.
Throw out the term millionaires and billionaires, because that's the left's agenda all the time. They always say, well, we're only going to go after those who are not paying their fair share. I don't mind saying that by way of a loud voice as opposed to whispering it at a press conference. Every single American will be affected by this. Every single American. They're not looking for a few pennies. They're looking for an awful lot of money. And if you want to justify your irresponsible spending, then you have to engage in extracting as much revenue as you can from the only people that provide it. When I'm home, people tell me, well, the government needs to pay for this. I said, well, when you say that, understand that the only way the government pays for anything is by taking it out of a hard-working American taxpayer's pocket. So if you can change the narrative, if you can play with words, if you can do this new wordsmithing that they're so good at, and pull that away, pull back the cover, and what you're going to find is every single American taxpayer is going to be affected by this. Forget about we're only going after the millionaires and billionaires. That's easy to say. That's not where the money lies. And what they're going to do is continue. The easiest hit of all is those of us who are the lower part of the pay scale. Those are the ones that are so vulnerable to what's going on right now. So I ask my friends, forget about what you hear coming out of their mouths. None of that is going to be true.
True. So, Mike, you touched on something that's very important in all of this in your comments earlier. You talk about the history of this country and why the folks that are in this boat crossed the Delaware. It was to form a new country, and there are constitutional protections that we have as Americans that came out of that. And I think we can all agree that this is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. This becomes a constitutional issue. And so the question then becomes, why are they doing this? Okay, I think Representative Henson just brings up an excellent point, and that is about the intent of what they're trying to do, which is to control your life and to get into every aspect of your life. And that's really what this feels like. Let's look, they're being intellectually dishonest about this entire process. The Democrats are. This is an exercise on paper to say that they're going to close the tax gap. We don't know how they arrived at those numbers. They won't tell us how they've arrived at those numbers. And we don't think that it really adds up. Matter of fact, we know it doesn't add up. And we have asked these questions on the Ways and Means Committee, and we simply aren't getting answers. So, number one, it's a static number that doesn't add up, and it's an attempt to on paper, to balance this ridiculous big government social spending spree that they're on. But in the end, it's about violating our Fourth Amendment, and it's the intent of the Democrats to have control over every part of your life.
Sir, if I can just ask a follow-up question. I mean, do you think ultimately at the end of the day, this provision might actually be preferable to the super wealthy? If you're a millionaire or billionaire, you're looking at either higher income tax rates or higher capital gains rates, and Democrats say, well, don't worry about that, we're just going to add a bunch more IRS enforcement. I mean, do you think it's actually...
I don't know a lot of billionaires. I know a lot of hardworking everyday Americans that really don't want the IRS. That's who I'm concerned about, and I think that's who we are concerned about.
And they're already doing it. They already snuck in the provision to go after Venmo, for example, Cash App transfers. So that was in the plan that passed in March. So they are already on this. So when we talk about intent, they've already started doing it, and that goes into effect in January. So I think people need to be aware of that.
And I want to add something to what Representative Mike Kelly said. When he said they're going after everybody, just remember, the millionaires and the billionaires are those most able to defend themselves once they've been attacked by the IRS. But it's everybody else that can't, all right? It's those people that cannot defend themselves who they are going to go after the most. And that's everybody in this room. That, you know, they've got that limit of under $400,000 or whatever it's going to be. But those people that make $10,000 a year, you know, whose transactions they're going to be snooping on, those are the folks that they'll go after, and they won't be able to defend themselves.
How about our guests? Mayor, Mr. Huddick, anything you want to add?
Thank you. I was going to chime in there. One of the big things that I wanted to say was the unintended consequences of this that we don't pay attention to in terms of how it trickles down in terms of costs to account holders and to our members. The reporter asked, you know, how does this affect, you know, the middle class? Well, it's going to affect the cost of our ability to provide services, and it's going to affect our ability to be able to manage such a broad-stroked proposal. I really want to thank the representatives for their comments about who this really ends up hurting. this does not get to the millionaires and billionaires. They're absolutely correct. They have the funds to defend themselves. It's the middle class families like mine. I have 4 children. I work 2 jobs, 4 children. I'm up 7 a.m. to be here in front of Congress because I love my community, I love my country, and I love being a part of financial services industry. But the fact is that I would be a perfect candidate where my parents give me a $10,000 gift for a baby, and the next thing I know, I'm subject to audit, and I don't have the funds to offer that type of defense. So this is going to hit middle American families hardest, especially those 2-income families that may have a life event or a single spike.
Yeah. Mr. Huddock?
Well, to put this in perspective, a grocery store's net profit, 2.2% of gross earnings. You have a $1.2 million business, that's $1.2 million going in and out of his bank account, and at the end of the day, he's barely making a living, $26,000 a year. To think that only the rich have lots of money going through their accounts is amazing to me. There is a total disconnect in the understanding of the amount of work that goes behind generating revenue, and in many cases, the small amount of reward at the end of the day.
So as we talk about this, and I would prefer to talk about our fellow Americans as low-income and middle-income families, because where it really hits you is in gas and groceries and any other consumable product that you're working with. But I think the key to what we're talking about today is an agency that is the most feared agency in our government, and it is destroying the faith and confidence and trust that the American people have to have. This is a voluntary tax, by the way. But when you take that away from hardworking American taxpayers and start to signal that the government is now the biggest entity in your life, and the 2 most expensive words right now are compliance and liability. And once we get to that level, you can forget the model that this country was built on and why so many people put their shoulder to the wheel and get up every morning so that they can provide a roof over the head of their kids and wife, food on the table, and a chance for a future that you can only attain in the United States. Equal opportunity, maybe not equal outcome, equal opportunity. This agent cannot become a weapon used against hardworking American taxpayers that destroys their faith, confidence, and trust in this model. That's the end of America when that happens, and that's what we're facing. This is much larger, by the way, than trying to get the unbanked to start banking or to get people to go ahead and whatever term you want to use when it comes to paying taxes. This is the destruction of the American form of government, and that is the most terrifying thing that's happening right now, and that's what we need to understand, and everyday people need to understand. The America that you knew, the America that your mom and dad knew, the America that grandpa and grandpa knew, and the great-grandparents who came across an ocean uncharted to start a new life. Do you really want to turn this over to irresponsible hands who will destroy you?
Anybody? Yeah.
Yeah, Andrew Trusky from the Daily Caller. This proposal also requires a lot of compliance from banks of different sizes. So I was wondering if you could speak to how it could affect community banks, smaller banks, mid-sized banks, banks in rural areas that obviously still cater to customers who have more than $10,000 in their account. How disproportionate will the effects be? Will they have the ability to fully comply, or could they face consequences if they can't for whatever reason?
I'm happy to just pipe in that this letter that I have from Aaron DeJong, who's the president and CEO of the Red Wing Credit Union in Red Wing, Minnesota. He says that, he's got 8,500 members. He's very concerned about this. He said the impact of this proposal will be felt by his members in 2 ways. And the first one, he says, the proposal will require new systems to be developed and implemented that will be both time-consuming and costly. The information required to report on this proposal, total cash inflows and outflows, is not part of the current system reporting. Smaller organizations like ourselves rely on third-party providers for our banking software, and the cost to implement this new reporting would be burdensome. I think he's being kind. As the proposal has now evolved to exclude some income sources from the total inflows calculation, the complexity and cost of development has only increased. It's going to be very significant, and I think maybe Mr. Huddock maybe you can comment about how this might affect small businesses, which in effect, a lot of our financial institutions are small family-owned businesses.
So this goes right to the heart of much of the misunderstanding about small business owners. To the heart of it is called internal capacity. You add a form, you add a compliance regime, you add additional software requirements. Small businesses just don't have internal capacity. It's not going down to, accounting and let the accounting department handle it, or legal and let the legal handle it. Small businesses don't have those things. They don't have internal capacity. That's the nature of a small business owner. You go to Amazon, you go to any of the big tech companies. They have internal capacity. They send it down to accounting. They send it down to legal, and they handle it. They have internal capacity to handle this. Every time you add an additional requirement to a small business, it comes off their bottom line because they have to outsource it. They have to go to their accountant. They have to find another accountant. I just did a webinar, continuing education on sourcing rules. 5 attorneys delivered 2 hours of continuing education. At the end, one of the attorneys said, "You know what? It took 5 of us to deliver this today because it's that complicated. Each one of us specializes in a special area, and we work together every day to make sure our clients are in compliance." And she said that the burden of non-compliance is going to end up on the small business owner because they can't afford 5 attorneys.
I think.
If I can chime in there real quick.
Yeah, please.
Mr. Paddock is absolutely correct, and your comments about size and scope are you call it internal capacity, we call it size and scope, and that's because I'm currently the CEO. I'm also the vice president of marketing, the vice president of IT, the oversight on operations, the legal compliance coordinator with the attorneys. I mean, we have a staff of 16 operating in the middle of the high desert, and you are so accurate, Mr. Emmer, Congressman Emmer, in terms of what was shared from Red Wing. The larger you make this proposal in order to try and put lipstick on the pig, the harder it becomes. It's not going to get any easier because a bad idea is a bad idea from the beginning. And that's really the focus here. This is a bad compliance idea. It's a bad regulatory idea, and it's a bad idea of what American values are. And I strongly thank you for your comments because they keep adding levels to this thing that is only going to make it worse, not better.
Thank you, Eric. I should have gone to you right away. I forgot. It's the CEO of a credit union. We were speaking your language. I think Ashley Hinson, then I think Drew and maybe Andrew have something to add.
Just a real quick anecdote actually, because I just happened to have the Iowa bankers in my office yesterday out here on their fly-in day, and they were sharing stories of what their customers are telling them. Not only are they talking about pulling their cash out, so you talk about the access to capital challenges, but the chaos and dysfunction that this will create. Tom, you mentioned trust and how people have these relationships with their financial institutions. They trust the people who they put their money in the bank, literally with. But this is about erosion of that trust. And one of the bankers yesterday shared the story. He was at his son's hockey game, actually it was a soccer game, but we were talking hockey and soccer yesterday. And he mentioned a customer at their institution came up and said, "You will not do this to me. You will not do this to me." So forcing these institutions to comply erodes that trust, because even though this would be a government edict, a government mandate, it erodes that trust and faith that people have with the institutions that they choose to execute their finances with. So I think ultimately that's what it's about. It's creating that chaos, again, that dependence and that fear. I think this is about fear and control, but I defer to my colleagues now. I yield back.
Well said. And think about what we're doing right now, sitting around a table, talking about inventing one of the most complex systems that's going to add cost, erode trust, and why? Think about what they want to do with this money. Specifically, this provision would be used to pay for a huge tax break for millionaires and billionaires in New Jersey, in New York, in Illinois, and California. So the hypocrisy of all of this, to be able to go after everyday Americans, go look under, as I said before, their cushions in their couch, to find every dollar possible to be able to give a billionaire in Manhattan a tax break is just wrong. And again, let's call out the hypocrisy for what it is, and let's go after them on this because it's wrong. America knows it's wrong. They know it's wrong, and that's why we're fighting back on this.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Tom, I spent a little over a year on the board of a credit union, and their margins are not great. You know, credit unions give their people incredible value, and so they don't make a whole lot of money. And the regulatory burden that this would put on a credit union, I think a lot of them would be looking at, hey, are we going to make this or not? Are we, you know, as a small business owner myself, I know that margins aren't very big sometimes. And so this kind of a regulatory burden would just put some of them right out of business. I mean, what's the best way to conquer? Divide. And that's exactly what I think this proposal would be doing. It would be dividing citizens from their financial institutions, making them not trust their financial institutions, and that's the best way in the world for the government to take over your life, is to divide you and not allow us to get together and fight back.
Spencer Brown with townhall.com. We're talking about how this is the intent behind it, whether or not it happens in this bill or in this package, they're still going to keep pushing for it. Would a Republican majority in the future take action to protect Americans and these institutions from things like this? And if so, what would that look like?
Is that a rhetorical question?
We already are.
That is right.
And we have a piece of legislation that we're working on together. And Drew, I think you can talk a little bit about the Ways and Means bill, because you have worked together, but we have dozens of Republicans who've already signed on to a piece of legislation to say, no, you cannot enact legislation that allows the IRS to spy on our bank accounts.
Well, and can I add, before you go to your bill, this was a grassroots effort that started in August. We actually sent 2 letters to the Department of Treasury. The first one had 121 of our members on it. The second one had almost 200 of our members on it. So this is absolutely something that every member of our conference disagrees with, and quite frankly, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle should be agreeing with us on it.
Listen, the bill is very simple. It just prohibits the Secretary of the Treasury from implementing these egregious rules. And you know, the momentum is building. I've got our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. A few of them are actually now going, wait just a minute, maybe this isn't such a good idea. And so the public pressure that's been put on them is causing them to pull back. But I think what Representative Henson has pointed out is something that cannot be underestimated here. It is the long-term intent of big government socialists on the other side of the aisle to look into your bank accounts. Let's look at the intent, whether it's in this bill or future bills, and absolutely, we're going to stand up every single day because we know it's wrong and the American people know it's wrong.
As a follow-up, do you think there will be enough pressure on Democrats across the aisle to get enough of them on it, to get on the floor and get it passed without having a majority?
Well, I think it's, you've got 20-some who've already signed on to a letter just yesterday saying that they're afraid of this provision. That's more than enough to kill it from being included this time around, but as far as it coming to the floor, I think we need a change in the gavel to make that happen.
Yeah. One of the things, when you talk about changing the gavel, I think we have to change the understanding of who it is that we are. Now, we're called congressmen, but we're really, I like the term representative better. We are not government agents. We are representing the people who elected us to come here and serve. And I think there's a confusion out there now about what is the government, who is the government, and what is the government's purpose. The sole purpose for us is to represent the people that sent us here. Mm-hmm. That's all it is. We're not government agents. We're not coming after you for anything. We are here to defend you because you cannot be here on an everyday basis. They turn that faith and trust and confidence to us and say, we want you to do it. We can't do it ourselves, but you can. And I think that somehow the lines get blurred on this and why people come to this institution. I don't come here to represent the Republican Party. I come here to represent 705,687 Americans in Pennsylvania's 16th Congressional District. When we forget what our responsibilities are and why we're here and what our job description is, and we think we actually become agents of the United States government, we are not. We are representatives of the American people, and if we forget that, then it's all over. And that's what it comes down to when we keep talking about this. The faith, the confidence and the trust that the American people have. That's what's being challenged right now by a group of people who were sent here by their constituents to represent them and to advocate for them. Where in the hell did we lose sight of what is our main responsibility for beer? And I think that is really comes down to it. That's the battle right now. When I hear about the battle for the soul of America, no. We have 1.5 million men and women in uniform that went and died for this model. Shame on us if we have a deaf ear or closed eye to what is happening right now. It comes back to being self-governed and relying on those who you send to do what they take their oath of office for. So all this other stuff is fun to talk about, but the reality comes down to it's up to us. It is up to us. Every single play, every single day. That's all we're here for.
On our toes and out on the field. Again, I want to thank our leader, Kevin McCarthy, for initiating this discussion and for his leadership on this issue. I want to thank our guests again. Mayor, thank you for joining us. Mr. Huddick, thank you for your insight. I want to thank my colleagues, and I believe that is it. Thank you.